You may remember and may not that I talked to you about God testing his people. I was telling the Wednesday night people that one of the things that I don't know how many of you noticed, my friend Harold was here last week, and one of the things I've always liked about Harold is he's very honest with me. And so when we went golfing after church on Sunday, and he said, "Did you know that? Do you know what trust means?" And from the Greek. And I said, "No. What does trust from the Greek mean?" He said, "It means to have faith in by testing." And he said, "Because I didn't believe that whole thing that you were pushing, that God tests his people. And so I looked it up and I was wrong." And that's what Harold does. He checks. And I like it when you check. If you check, that's great for me. That means I, in some manner or other, got you to read your Bible. But I talked about God testing his people and God testing Abraham. And he tested Abraham in that place in his life that was the most important thing to him, his son. And this week, I want to continue on that same area to a subject that almost seems like it's the same, but is actually quite different. I'm going to talk to you about trials. Well, testing occurs because God purposely places things in our paths that are designed to allow us to choose to have faith in him. Trials generally come as a normal part of living in a fallen world. So I want to be able to try to separate. When you go to school, so it says when you're going to school, you've been in school how long now? 2 weeks? Have you had a test yet? Okay. So why did they give you the test? See if you learn what they were talking about, right? God does the very same thing to us. My dad used to call it going to school in life. And God will actually keep making you take the same test until you actually pass it. He's not like the California rule that says, no, we got to bump them up. God doesn't bump you up until you actually know what it is that you're supposed to know. And you've learned that lesson. And that's testing. But trials are different. We are fallen creatures. At least I am. I seem to be falling more now than I used to, but it's because I hear that when you get older, your balance goes off a little bit. But we're fallen creatures, and we're surrounded and living in a fallen world full of other fallen creatures. That's why I don't get this whole thing of people not wanting to come to church, because they're a bunch of hypocrites. We're all fallen creatures. We wouldn't be here if we didn't need work. Trials are going to come to us simply because we're living in a diseased and fallen world. God doesn't have to bring a trial into our lives because they're going to happen anyway. There are things that we are confronted with that can devastate our lives. Those are trials. God didn't bring us those things onto us. They're part of living here. But God has given us a promise in Romans 8:28. He says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who've been called according to his purpose." God says that I can take everything that happens in your life and I can make something good out of it. Like that song said, something beautiful. You've got all these dreams and you've got all these things that you think are going to happen, and they just explode in your face. Anybody ever had that happen? Is it just me? You have these plans. We have plans for our kids. We have plans, I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to do this. And then things just explode. I remember when Paul and I were getting ready to go on our honeymoon. And we had booked this tour through Sport Tours. They were the kind of co-thing to Sport Chalet. And I booked a tour there. And so, 6 o'clock in the morning, we were in the Burbank Airport waiting to fly to Breckenridge, Colorado for our skiing trip honeymoon. And there's nobody in Burbank Airport at 6 o'clock in the morning, I didn't tell you. There weren't even workers in it. We were sitting there by ourselves. And there's this lady wandering around through all of the luggage, and she sees two people sitting over there. She comes over and she says, "Mr. and Mrs. Stackhouse?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so from Sport Tours." It was actually the owner of Sport Tours. And she said, "We had an error in your reservations. My guy at Sport Tours didn't confirm your reservation at your hotel. And that's Easter week." So she said, "But don't worry." And now I'm going, right? The only reason they knew was because I had requested flowers to be put in the room directly to the hotel. The hotel eventually called them and said, "We don't even have reservations for them. You never confirmed them." And so, guys, it pays to think ahead. And so she said, "But don't worry, we've made other plans for you." I don't know how many times where I've had plans set up and God has made other plans. And that's the way it works. But just as Abraham was the best representative for God testing his children, this morning I want to look at the life of Joseph, because he is the epitome of the best example of trials turned to gold. I'm going to give you the story of Joseph in a synopsis, because if we tried to read all that, it's about 12 or 13 chapters with an interlude in the middle of it. And so I'm going to kind of go through it. If you'd like to look at this later, it goes all the way from chapter 37 through chapter 50. So Joseph was this boy that, I don't know, a lot of things about him I really identify with. He had a big mouth. He didn't know what not to say and what not to share. So I identify with that. Peter would have too. But he just decided, I'm going to share everything. And so when he had these visions, he shared them with his brothers. And man, they didn't like that. And he even shared them with his parents, and they didn't like it very much either. What made matters worse is, how many of you had siblings growing up? Okay, keep those hands up for just a minute. How many of you thought that your parents liked your sibling more than you? Okay, how many of you knew that they liked them more than you? Probably a few of you, right? Dad doted on Joseph. He was absolutely his dad's treasure. And while all the other guys had to be out and doing stuff, Joseph was coddled. And Dad made it really bad by giving him this coat. I'll bet we've got some people here that even saw the play, right? The musical, right? So he gave him this coat. And the problem with the coat is that it was the long coat. See, when you're out shepherding, you don't get a long coat because you're going to get that dragging in the ground. You get these short things just to keep you warm. Well, Joseph got the long thing. And that was for royalty. And boy, that just irked his brothers. And the fact that he couldn't shut up about those dreams. And so finally, they got together and said, let's kill him. When he comes out here the next time, we'll just kill him. But a couple of them, Reuben said, let's not kill the boy. Let's just throw him in the pit and leave him there. And Reuben had it in his brain that he was going to come back later when all the other brothers had left and release Joseph. But when Reuben was gone, they had captured Joseph and thrown him in, and they decided, hey, instead of doing anything to Joseph ourselves, why don't we sell him into slavery? The Ishmaelites will be coming by here, and we'll just, with their caravan, we'll just sell him. So we're making money on it, and we're not actually doing him any harm. So that's what they did. And of course, Reuben comes back to check the pit, and guess what? Joseph's gone. And they take back Joseph's coat, and they bloody it all up. Rip it up and bloody it up, and they said, we just found this. And Jacob is inconsolable. And so they deal with that for quite a long time. On the other hand, Joseph here has been sold into slavery, and the Ishmaelites take him to Egypt, and he's sold to a guy named Potiphar, who's, I think that was more of a title than anything else. But he ran a lot of the area, and he was a pretty wealthy guy, and so he put Joseph in charge of his whole house. They found Joseph to be really smart, and everything that Joseph touched turned to gold. He was like Midas. Whatever he touched, God blessed. And so Potiphar said, hey, you got my whole house. You're in charge of everything. And then you'd think that was bad enough, being captured by your brothers and sold into slavery. Never seeing your family again. But now, you're saying, well, at least we're making the best of it. But Potiphar's wife decided she liked Joseph. And you can kind of just get the feeling from reading that area that Joseph wasn't the first guy she had eyes on. But she liked Joseph, and she wanted to get him in the sack with her. That's how we say it in Texas. And he wasn't having nothing of it, so she framed him for molesting her. Off to prison he goes. And prisons back then weren't pretty. They didn't coddle them like we do now. And but the prison guard, the foreman, found that, again, everything Joseph touched just turned to gold. Everything he did, God blessed. And so he put Joseph in charge of all the rest of the prisoners. And there were some prisoners there that had some dreams, and Joseph told them what their dreams meant. And he said, when you get out, tell Pharaoh about me, that I've been wrongly imprisoned. Well, they got out and forgot all about Finally, Pharaoh has a dream. And nobody can decipher it. And the one guy, the wine taster, the guy that brings his wine, said, you know, there was a guy in prison. And he knew how to decipher dreams. And so he said, bring him on out. So before you get to go to the king, guess what happens? You get a bag. You got to get all gussied up. They don't let you come in there all dirty and stinky. And so they got him all set, prettied up, and they brought him to Pharaoh. And he tells Pharaoh exactly what it means. You're going to have 7 years of just great, a bountiful harvest, and then you're going to have a bunch of years that are going to be so bad that it's going to make, you're going to completely forget that you had any times of bounty. That it's going to be complete famine. And so Joseph tells him, you need to find somebody that's smart and put them in charge so that they collect grain and stuff like that from everybody. And Pharaoh, you know what? Pharaoh at this time, the guy that was leading Pharaoh, many people believe it was not an Egyptian at this point. That's actually a very interesting part of their time, that they were actually conquered by some shepherd people. They called them the shepherd kings. And so it was not actually an Egyptian that was Pharaoh at the time, but the guy was smart. And he said, well, I'm not going to find anybody smarter than you. So he puts Joseph in charge of the whole land. Everything. He said, the only person above you is me, and gave Joseph his ring. Because you need the ring. That's your signature. And so, now Joseph is in charge of everything, and he's bringing in money right and left because people are now starving. And they're bringing first they bring their animals and trade them in for grain. And then when they're out of animals, they start trading in their land. From all over. Pharaoh's getting rich. And all of a sudden, these young guys that were his brothers show up. And he recognizes them right off the bat. Now, they wouldn't have recognized him because probably when he left, he was something around 14 or 15. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't look anything like I did at 14 or 15. And plus, Joseph now has to dress as an Egyptian. So they would have shaved his head and give him one of those little things you saw in the Ten Commandments, you know. Nowadays we call him a man bun, don't we? He would have a little man bun up there, but bald all the way rest around. They take all the hair off of your body. And he would have been dressed as an Egyptian because they wouldn't let him around them otherwise. And so they didn't recognize him. He recognized them right off. And he tells them, you know, the grain is here. You know, first he tells them, you guys are spies. No, we're not. No, we're not. And so they give him money for the grain. And he secretly has people put their money back in their animals. And he plays a couple tricks on them. In the end, he gets them to bring, he keeps one of them, Simeon, and he gets them to bring Benjamin. See, Benjamin is the only brother that is his full brother. The rest of these boys and men were half-brothers. But Benjamin was his full brother. His mother died in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. And so he has them bring Benjamin, which is now Jacob's treasure, because Joseph is gone. And he brings him. And they bring Benjamin. And then he has them all sitting down at the table. eating. And he doesn't eat with them. See, Egyptians would not eat with the Hebrews. And he has his own table up there, but he sees them. And he sees his little brother there. And sorrow just begins to overwhelm him. And he rushes out of the room to his chambers and cries until he gets enough of it out of the system, and he comes back and he's feeling better. And in the end, he's sitting there with them and reveals himself to them. And they're startled. I'm Joseph, the young man that you sold into slavery. To finish off the story, they go back and they tell Jacob that his son Joseph is alive and that he wants them all to come back and live in Egypt because they'll be taken care of. They don't have to worry about famine anymore because you're now the boss's family, right? And so I often wonder, what did they tell Jacob about why Joseph is still alive? You know? Have you ever wondered that when you're reading this story? What did they tell him? Because it's doubtful they just came out and told the truth. When you've been hiding a lie that long, it doesn't just come blurting out of your mouth. Whatever it was, they all moved to Egypt. And they are taken care of, and Jacob dies. Very, very old, he dies. And the boys, the other men, brothers, they're worried. Because do you ever find yourself judging people by what you would think or what you might do in that situation? You ever do that? You know what's in your own heart, and you go, man, if that were me, I'd pop them. Right? If that were me, there's no way I would. Yeah. That's what the boys are thinking. They're thinking, Dad's gone now, and Joseph is going to kill us. I want you to listen to what Joseph says. Genesis chapter 50, 19 through 20. But Joseph said to them, don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended harm to me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. You meant to do me wrong. I understand that. But God had something great that He had in store by your harm. Joseph trusted God implicitly and understood that God had taken something that was meant to be terrible and turned it into victory. Nowhere are we told in the Bible that God caused the brothers to hate Joseph and conspire against him. I think Joseph was obnoxious enough on his own to cause that. God just used their act to bring about the salvation of His people. There are a bunch of things that happen in our lives that are terrible, terrible things. Many of you have had lots of them happen to you. But God, He's in it for the long haul. Did you know that? He's in it for the long haul. And And He can take those things and create something beautiful. He takes battles that we think we've just gotten annihilated on and turns them into victory. He takes sometimes some of the things in our lives and our personalities that we think, man, how can I ever do what you've asked me to do? Man, I used to do some awful things. How can you turn around and make me a pastor? How can you do that? God, I just feel so torn up by whatever this is in my life. I've lost my job. God, how can you turn this into something good? You know what? I don't know how. But I know that He can. And He does time and time again. Often we don't understand it. We don't see it right away. My mother got very sick with Lou Gehrig's disease. And I was mad at God. When she passed away, I was just as angry as I could be. Pretty honest with Him about it. You know, God doesn't mind your emotions if you're honest with Him about it. He gave those to you, you know. And I was angry. Man, she served God all her life, her adult life. When the church needed something, she was there to do it. How could you? It didn't make me angry that she died. It made me angry how she died. It's horrible. And how could you do that, God? And then He reminded me. He said, you know, when she was laying there a week and a half beforehand, and you left and went back home, who do you think talked to you and said, you need to go back and be with your mom? And so I went back and spent a whole week with Mom. A whole week by her bedside, talking to her. She couldn't talk. She couldn't move. She couldn't even bat her eyelids. But God told me, you need to be there. And so I did. And I came back home on a Friday. On Sunday afternoon, she passed away. But I was able to say, before I left, I told my mom, when I'd left the week before, she had been crying. And before I left this time, I said, Mom, you can leave. I'll take care of Dad. And she was finally able to let go. And it was God that gave me that assurance that I needed to go back and stay with my mom. It was God who told me what to tell her. We don't know where victories will happen. We don't know when trials are going to be coming our way. But even in the case of Job, who was devastated by trials, God turned it into victory. And He can do that in your life. But you know what Joseph did that enabled God to do that? He was like a child. He trusted God without reservation. He understood that whatever comes my way, God is God, and I've got to do what's right. There are going to be many terrible things that will happen to God's people because we live in an evil world. It continues this very day. God tells us He will work everything to our good. That doesn't mean that you're going to enjoy those things. I can tell you right now, Joseph did not enjoy prison. It doesn't matter if you're the boss. Joseph hated prison, but he trusted God. It does mean that God is still actively loving you, even in and through all of your trials. God is loving you today. He loves each and every one of you. And the fact that we have to go through trials here, man, that's a bummer. You can blame that on Adam and Eve, and we haven't been doing much better. But because of that, we've got trials. But God, from the very start, loved us and prepared a place for His Son to save us, even way back then. That's making victory out of a trial. Let's bow our heads. I don't know if you're going through trials right now. I know that if you are, it could be tearing you up inside. And I would tell you, don't hold those things yourself. We've been reading on Wednesday nights that this church, this is a safe place. It must be a safe place for you to come and pour out your heart to your brothers and sisters. Because we are called to hurt with you, and we're called to have joy with you. It's called fellowship. And if you're hurting, let us know. And cast all your cares, just like we sang about last week. Cast all your cares on God, because He is able to carry them.